Welcome, everybody, to our AI webinar series. I'll keep admitting people as they come in. This series is brought to you by SalesChoice, which is specializing in ending revenue uncertainty for human advantage. I'm your host, Jen Yim. I'm the Director of Product and Marketing here at SalesChoice, and we bring three services to market powered by our AI platform: Sales Insights, which helps sales professionals with guided insights; Mood Insights, which connects frontline workers to their leadership; and third, our AI and data science as a service, where we build, design, and maintain AI models with a new focus on generative AI. Over the years, we've created a massive trove of AI thought leadership content and revenue growth. And I invite everyone to go to our website, saleschoice.com/resources, to take a look at what we've got there. And today I have with us Jeff Pedowitz from the Pedowitz Group. Jeff, welcome to this series. And could you tell us a bit about yourself?
Sure. Thanks, Jennifer. And thanks, Cindy. It's really awesome to be here today. And hello, everybody. Well, I'd say for the last 30 years, I've been helping our clients use technology to build better revenue engines for their organizations. And we help them with their processes, their data, their personnel, their org structure, and constantly trying to leverage technology so that they can scale. And of course, AI has been around for quite some time, not since we all heard about ChatGPT a few years ago, but we've been working with it for quite some time and working with our clients to embed it. And when I'm not busy, working with our clients, which probably seems like a lot, like Cindy, I enjoy traveling. I enjoy great food, great friends, great wine.
Awesome. And I'm going to just kick it off to our Dr. Cindy Gordon to start the conversation.
Thanks so much. Welcome, everybody. And Jeff, we should have added the great swimming lengths that we were talking about earlier. It's being fit and healthy is so important for all of us. Well, welcome, everybody. We're looking forward to an engaging conversation. Some of you have also put in questions earlier, so really encourage you, if you've got some questions, to put them in the chat, and Jen will be skimming and looking. But obviously, Jeff's well published. I am too. And when someone decides to write a book, there's usually a story behind it. And, Jeff, I really thought the title on revenue architecture was really timely. And so I really wanted you to talk about, why do you think even the messaging and the theme is so important now? And just to hear the story. And congratulations for getting this book out. And I've got a copy, and I encourage all of you to actually pick it up as well. It's just on Amazon. Jeff?
Oh, thanks, Cindy. Appreciate that. Well, I think all of us in business, we're always pursuing revenue. I mean, that's the name of the game, right? We're trying to grow our companies. We're doing sales. We're doing marketing. We're always trying to get more revenue, grow that top line. But pursuing and growing revenue versus architecting revenue are two very different things. And I guess it's, just been spending so much of my career in really thinking through the systems and the processes and how organizations need to organize themselves to pursue better revenue. That's really where I kind of centered in on architecture as a key thing, because it's really about thinking through, how do you design the most optimal pursuit go to market for your company in an ever-changing competitive landscape. And then, of course, when you factor AI into it, it allows you to do things that we never could do before, not just in becoming more efficient, but in opening up new revenue streams, thinking through new business models, creating new partnerships. And so really, that's really kind of how I got inspired by pairing those two together.
Yeah, the whole concept of architecture implies a holistic design construct. Before we go to the next slide, Jen, Jeff, are you finding that we have the right, you can leave the other slide up, Jen. Are you finding we have the right skills in the organizations to really think around the entire operating model and revenue and the flows? Because obviously organizational design is a big
No,
factor.
there's still a massive gap between the potential of what all of us can leverage AI for and how we're actually using it day in and day out. We're still in the nascent stages. Yes, I'd say so. Most of us are playing around with a ChatGPT or Perplexity, Jasper, some of these things, and we're doing some valuable things for work and for home. But that's just scratching the surface. When you start talking about, for example, AI agents, maybe you've seen the cute Salesforce commercials with Matthew McConaughey and what Salesforce is doing, but that's just really the tip of the iceberg. So repetitive tasks, workflow actions that we as humans do today. Um, just take something simple. I want to do some research. I want to write up a white paper and I want to distribute it. That all requires different skills. Well, you can write different AI agents that will do the research, organize it, distill it, come up with the copy, lay it out, produce it, syndicate it, and distribute it. And when you start building teams or crews of AI agents, you can start to create massive productivity gains that free up people to be more strategic, to be more emotive, to be more innovative. And so we're just at the very early stages of being able to leverage the power of AI. And I'm not talking about just the large language models, because these agents can take advantage of a wide variety of AI capabilities in order to become more productive for an enterprise.
Yeah, and then the diagram that's up here is, essentially a blueprint, and maybe just to share in terms of how you look at accelerating that whole digital transformation journey, and because obviously the challenge side is so important to take stock of where are you fundamentally to enable the speed of the creative thoughts that you're talking about.
Yeah, I think the skill gap is definitely one of the big challenges for people. Understanding the use cases is another. And then data is the third. Now, even before AI came along, fascinating. Every B2B company we talk to has an issue with their data. No one spends money to fix and clean their data on a yearly basis. They spend money to get more data. They're constantly getting more systems. They're buying more lists. They're acquiring more, but they're not taking the steps to really make sure their data is pristine, accurate, up to date. And when you talk about AI, it's garbage in, garbage out. So if you're not going to make the investments and you start rushing forward and you start bringing in AI tools, you're building your business on a very shaky foundation, right? So your AI is not going to deliver what you want because you're using very faulty data to start with.
Yeah, we constantly see the fragmentation of data and not having even the thoughtful codification of data, and then obviously that assembly process you can still do, but the issue is what do you do to sustain those models, and obviously as new data comes in, being able to manage any of the regulatory security risks. Yeah, it's a fascinating area. Let's go to the next question, Jen, if you don't mind. So when we talk about the journey, what have you been seeing is, how do you go about executing a successful AI journey? And then Jen, the next slide.
There's an old saying of sales, KISS, right? Keep it simple, stupid, or I guess sweetheart, or whatever we want to use for that second S. But um, it can be overwhelming thinking about everything AI could or should do for your enterprise. But the best thing to do is just make a list of all your repetitive processes within sales and marketing. What are the things that people are doing over and over and over again? And where, if you applied AI against it to make that more efficient and automate, could you do so with the least amount of effort for the greatest return? And just pick one and do that for 30 days and get that one thing AI enabled. Then move to the next one. So each month, you're systematically kind of working through sales and marketing. And that's how you get started on your journey. Now, for many sales marketing organizations, they're using AI to write proposals, do research on 10Ks. They're creating content, they're creating email, and that's a great start. But they're not using it, for example, lead qualification and pipeline forecasting. They're not doing it for predictive modeling. They're not doing it for advanced segmentation and marketing. They're not doing it for campaign analysis. I mean, they're not doing it for dynamic budgeting. So there's a lot of other processes that are critically important to the sales and marketing function that AI could be leveraged against. But it's really a matter of sitting down and thinking through it. And there is a lot of pressure from boards and CEOs to have AI replace people. And make no mistake, it will take away some jobs, but it's also going to create new jobs. And new careers are going to open up. And people have to take a long view here. in terms of what is this as a catalyst? How does this enable us to grow as a business over the next 20 years? Stop thinking about what we can't do or what's going to change because of what we have been doing for the past 20 years. Look, if I look at when I started my career, not to date myself too much, but there wasn't an internet, there was no email, there were no social channels, there wasn't mobile, there wasn't any of these things. And so then over since that time, these are all now careers and different jobs that people are doing. And sure, maybe people aren't doing as much database marketing as or as much direct mail, although those industries are still out there. So yeah, some jobs go away, new jobs get created, but stop focusing on what's being taken away and focus on what you're going to get.
I really like the perspective of chipping away and, just recognizing you need to start now, but start, applying your KISS concept and just looking at repetitive jobs that in fact could make a difference, but also something you might understand and have the leadership ability to execute and learn from. It reminds me of the methodology of jobs to be done, right? Just create the list, make it simple, make it clear. We all know that AI in workflow automation is the best with repetitive tasks. I think the other backdrop that, we also need to recognize is that the return on investment with a lot of the AI initiatives is averaging, I think it's about 5% worldwide right now. And so, you've got this huge dynamic of move, 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 right? Very transformational, lots of infrastructure. And the key message, I think, is you got to chip away, you got to get started, but you can't stand still, right? And
I think that number applies to some of the large scale investments, when you're building out your own LLM or
yeah,
doing some substantial system integration, but the ROI is much higher. If you're making small changes to your business processes, you could see anywhere from a 20 to 40x return on investment just by AI enabling your business processes.
and are people on the cost saving side, taking out from a resourcing point of view, Jeff? Or is that where you're seeing the cost savings, or is it kind of a blend of some's revenue?
Yes, there is some jobs being eliminated, but it's a little confusing because it's too simple to point a finger at AI. I mean, there's been trends that are happening in B2B marketing right now that have nothing to do with AI. Many marketing budgets are getting slashed. Sales cycles are getting longer and more complicated. So it's taking longer and it's harder for many reps to meet quota. Not that many of them were meeting it to begin with. And you're getting more decision makers, more multiple budget owners, and this is having significant implications. So regardless of what your cost of acquisition is for a customer, it has gone up in the last 2 years materially, and your time to value and your predictability on your pipeline has also come under fire. So those are all factors that have nothing to do with AI. They have to do with macro business conditions that are happening in our landscape. Then when you layer in AI on top of that, it can muddy the water. But yeah, there's a lot that business leaders are trying to struggle with right now, particularly the revenue leaders.
Yeah, that's a really good point, Jeff. Thank you. Next slide, Jen. Yeah, so I really like this here is because you stepped back and you sort of said, okay, as you're going through the evolution and building governance and excellence, you had a framework for the initiation all the way through innovation. So maybe just to talk a little bit about this framework and, why it's important.
Yeah, just starting with the major headers, and we've been using these 6 components for over 12 years now because we feel they best represent everything you have to do on your revenue engine. Your strategy, your plan, right? Your go-to-market, how you're going to do things, where you're playing, where you're positioning, your personnel, your skills, how you're structured, career development, your core processes for driving revenue and customer engagement. What technology and systems are you strategically using to enhance the customer experience and grow revenue? How do you make sure that you're customer oriented, not product or company oriented? And then finally, are you measuring the right things? And do you have a culture of measurement? So against that backdrop, then we start applying steps to become more masterful in AI. So kind of walking you through. And most companies right now are in various stages of initiation. They have ad hoc experimentation. They have different groups using different tools. the fear factor, I think, has greatly subsided more to an expectation and understanding, okay, you have to start using this in some way to your job. Um, but for many companies, they have not yet reached that integration stage where companies or departments are purposefully working together. So shared processes, shared things across teams. That's a great first place to start, particularly between sales and marketing to build alignment. And once you start doing that, and you have multiple teams and departments working together, you can actually start having actionable enterprise intelligence, not just department level intelligence. That intelligence then leads to the ability to start growing across your business because you're going to start learning what's working, what's not working. You're going to be able to make more predictive decisions. And then once you really have it spread out across your business, and if you're doing this right, it's going to take you the better part of 12 to 18 months
Oh, for
to really fully AI enable your business. But after that, you're going to be way ahead. And that's really the major lesson for today is most people are not ahead of you yet. Everyone's trying to figure this out right now. But if you continue to wait and don't get started, the companies and the people that are openly embracing AI and are figuring out how to use it, those are the ones that are going to leapfrog and get that competitive advantage and are going to start beating you every time, and especially in the revenue pursuit game. And so that's why it is really important to start now and not wait.
And what are your thoughts on the players in the broader market with the tools and technology side? Because obviously, you've got Salesforce, right, which obviously we leverage, and our AI enablements are on the Salesforce footprint. You got Microsoft Dynamics, who've made some very strategic investments and relationships, and I thought their move with LinkedIn was quite brilliant. And obviously, you gain so much, visibility into the LinkedIn channel. And then we've also got a whole slew of new innovators, right? Which are basically saying, we'll disintermediate the sales forces with agentic AI. But what are your perspectives and any thoughts on folks and directions they should go?
Yeah, I mean, the big tech companies are all making their major bets. You have Meta, that's really investing a lot in its own Llama and its LLM, and really using a lot of its advertising and data to figure out how to obviously continue to grow that social engagement. I think Salesforce has done a really good job of building out Agentforce inside of their platform. And of course, if you are a Salesforce user and they do have significant market share, that's going to be a capability to add. Microsoft's investment in OpenAI is significant, and but their Copilot, which they've been in market now for about a year, has woefully undermet expectations. It really is quite deficient in almost every area. So they still have a lot of work to do. But given that Office is almost on everybody's desktop, it's going to be a matter of time, but they haven't quite gotten it yet. But they're still going to be a major player. Oracle, of course, continues to approach this more from the back end, not necessarily from the front end, really just providing the databases and the infrastructure that's powering it. Outside of really OpenAI and maybe Claude and some of these LLMs, there hasn't yet been a major disruptor. There isn't a major application or a vendor that's challenging the industry leaders. And the amount of the billions of dollars that the industry leaders have put in have not yet been monetized or it found its way yet into really getting users to adopt it. But it's going to be a matter of time. And I feel like this is the second coming of the dot-com era, where you have a lot of people throwing a lot of money. There's tens of thousands of AI startups, and most of these are never going to go the distance. But out of this, we're going to get the next Salesforce or Marketo or Amazon, and we just don't know what it is yet. And obviously, as an investor, I wish I did know. I'd be all over it. So I think we're going to go through another year and a half of a lot of change and a lot of uncertainty, but then the field will clear, and I think it will usher in another generation of growth.
Yeah, and the only player maybe you didn't mention was Elon Musk with X, and certainly his positioning, but maybe we can leave that for another
Well,
webinar.
Elon's always a disruptor. I'd say though, for right now, at
Yeah,
least from what we're talking about today, from an AI standpoint, he's behind. But I wouldn't necessarily bet against him either. He probably has some strategy that he's working on.
yeah, for sure. Next slide, Jen. So Obviously in these sessions, and I'll probably chip in here a little bit, is, when you're making your investments in AI and, Jeff talked about the dynamics of the journey and I think, underpinnings of you need to get started, but also the iterative learning is so critical to sustaining and building confidence and trust as you go through the whole journey. But what results, and we talked a little bit about ROI, but let's maybe tell some stories about either industries or specific, clients, but we won't disclose the names where results can be achieved, Jeff.
There's different ways of measuring results. Certainly from an efficiency standpoint, I'd say that people that have been adopting AI to improve their processes, we're seeing anywhere from a 20 to 50% lift in efficiency and productivity year over year. And we've seen this at multiple companies, including our own. Our team is openly embracing using a wide variety of AI tools to improve our processes for communicating with clients, for diagnosing lots of data, for doing research, doing analysis. And these are things that, we still need to do, but it saves a lot of time. On the driving revenue side, not set yet seeing any clear people that are doing it yet, but there are a lot of opportunities. And, starting with improving forecasting, there's, a lot of opportunities to really tighten up pipeline and forecast accuracy using AI, because AI can really cut through all the emotional rhetoric that a salesperson would have, because they get emotionally attached to their deals, and AI can look at the hard data and tell you with a higher degree of certainty, what's going to close and what's not going to close. And then, there are account-based platforms like 6sense and demand-based that are doing a really nice job with some of that data. Not necessarily from a forecasting perspective, but they're giving you a lot higher inference on which accounts are more likely to close. And so if you happen to have them, of course, in your pursuit and then you're in your pipeline, it really helps. So companies that are really investing in those platforms are seeing really good results.
Yeah, I've followed 6sense, but I haven't really, had a chance to really experience their entire life cycle. Obviously, in our world, where we do, predictive forecasting, we've definitely seen the quality of the AI. And, it takes time for sales leaders to really say, huh, better to check to see what the odds are here in this particular opportunity in terms of my forecast. And we've got some accounts now that they honestly just say, we're not moving that into the outlook because it's just consistently every time that it's been at 85% accuracy, it's been more right than wrong. So, but that takes some maturity, time for people to build that trust. But to your earlier point, Jeff, we always see the poor adoption of CRM in the utilization of the tools that people have. So what we often have to do, and it's unbelievable, we have to really deal with the KPIs and, the culture and changing the job descriptions so that, the reps understand for them to receive their commission. The data needs to be in there in the timely manner, but also restructuring the workflows, Jeff. There's so many of the workflows that have open-ended fields. They're not drop downs. They're not locked in. They're like, so that whole cadence of thinking. I'm one of my thesis, and I'd like to clarify with you, but I think some of the results could be far more optimal if we had people in RevOps that actually had been in sales, like real sales people that had to carry a bag, advanced sell the process. And I often think that, we've got people that are trying to do a good job, but they really don't have that native, DNA of a deep sales professional. So I think we often have gaps in skill sets, trying to solve problems that maybe the right people aren't the right people solving
We've
them.
talked about that for years, and we've always encouraged our marketing clients, particularly those that did not have a sales background, to just get out in the field and go on some sales calls. It's really easy in marketing to sit in your ivory tower and come up with all this content and creative, but you need to see how it's received, and you need to be open to listening and understand how the client perceives things. And I think if you can really open your mind and your eyes to that, then you can develop better content that will resonate.
It's really good to hear that, Jeff. I think it's a continual reminder for cultural transformation. Any other perspective on how results can be achieved, from your experiences, Jeff?
Well, also, certainly results and data insights is another one. You know, a lot of times executives are chasing data, getting reports after the fact. Most of the reports and dashboards businesses use are the rear view. What happened? You know, how did we do last quarter? What have we done? How did this campaign perform? And that's helpful. Obviously, it's better to know than not know. But then I go forward to be able to be more predictive. If I not just do this campaign, but to this segment with this combination of touches in this order, with this messaging for this particular person, I will get this type of return. And being able to know that beforehand. Or in sales, hey, you know, if I know before I make a single call or tell my sales team to do anything, if they call on these three accounts first before they call on these other three accounts, then their chances of closing are going to be X amount higher. So the results are definitely, and that's been a capability for quite some time now. You know, whether you're using Einstein inside of Salesforce, um, you know, so you don't necessarily need some of the newer AI capabilities, but you know, machine learning and deep AI has been around for quite some time. And now, of course, everyone's investing in some version of LLM on top of their capabilities. So being able to start interacting with reports and systems to be able to ask questions and have that data come back to you in real time, I think is going to elevate it to the next level.
That's those really good points, Jeff. One of the points that we've learned just maybe over the last 6, 7 months is, connecting to the Amazon Bedrock infrastructure for testing different LLMs and just seeing the variety of performance on a single use case. So I think one of the key things in AI is really important to people to understand that, it's not a one-trick pony. There's each of these LLMs have been trained on different data sets, and some of them are more mature in particular data set structures if you can, get into the details with the scientists. And we did find that Mistral, for example, in France, way outperformed OpenAI or Anthropic or Gemini, the Claude model from Google. And that was in people-related data. So I think it's important to understand that AI for LLMs has a variety of options, and you need to really look at this initially from a research discovery point of view to get the most optimal outcome. And that's the part of the journey that I often feel people don't really spend the time analyzing. When you see a spread of 70% predictive accuracy to 98%, it's usually a bit of a clue that
Well,
maybe.
and I think the other thing about you're right. These large language models, I mean, in most cases, they're big Swiss Army knives,
Yeah.
and they're meant to handle a number of different situations well, or cover a number of different areas, but they're not specifically trained in any one deep domain. That's why they can only get you so far. And that's why, and so part of becoming more AI illiterate, not illiterate, but becoming more AI literate in your company is developing an understanding of which tools can help you grow to that next level. So, for example, using a Jasper or a Write Sonic or Writer, these models, while they have some LLM capability in it, they are more deeply trained in content production. So their platforms are going to go much further in that specific area, and just like you might find a different type of AI platform for reporting. And so, of course, the big enterprises, if you're at a Fortune 5,000 company, you probably already have some LLM initiatives underway because you can afford it and you're developing it. But for the vast majority of businesses, don't have those kinds of budgets. So you have to start being much more specific on how you want to build out these use cases and getting an understanding of which tools are going to make sense for you and which are not. And of course, the landscape's changing all the time. Now, I've been in the MarTech game. Everybody knows this for over 20 years. And when I was at first at Eloqua, this is back in 2005, there were literally less than 10 applications, that you could be in MarTech. And then, of course, everyone that follows Scott Brinker and the landscape, it grew to, let's say, 14,000 applications by now this year, 2025. But by comparison, when ChatGPT was announced 2+ years ago till now, there's 75,000 plus applications that have hit the market that are some. Now, most of these aren't full-on applications. They're little tools or slivers, but the pace of innovation is exponential. No one, certainly not me, probably not even Mr. Brinker, can keep track of 75,000 applications, especially, although he could probably do a better job than most of us. But the point is, you still have to have an active mindset where you're experimenting. You should have some room carved out in your budget, talk to a number of people, go to a lot of the weekly groups, and really find out what the use cases are. And that's why it really helps provide that guidance versus being overwhelmed by everything that you could do. Start thinking about what you should do, and then narrow your search to figure out which types of tools and platforms are going to work best.
Yeah, yeah, really good closing comments on the results side. And, I think there's a key theme is we're all learning. It needs to be iterative and recognize the value of the networks and the other communities and to be sharing, in those dialogues because, you just look at the announcements yesterday, right, from China, and it's like, okay, how quickly all of a sudden another dynamic can come in to the marketplace, right? And we'll see more of those spikes.
Well, we
Next.
absolutely are, and that's just also another great example of how the press can overhype
Mhm.
something. Now, don't get me wrong, it's awesome, and it's a positive that there are other alternatives and cheaper ways to train these models, but it's also completely overstated. That number that they spent was one for one little narrow window of a couple weeks of testing. It even said if you actually went and read it, they've been working on this for years. So the reality is they did spend hundreds of millions of dollars and billions of dollars to develop that platform, but everyone focused in on that one number. But it should not be lost, though, that they did find a more efficient way to do it, and that the cost of training these LLMs are going to come down, and then the moats that our U.S. tech companies are trying to build and protect aren't as big as we think they are. So the fact is, we do live in a global world. There is competition, and competition is a good thing, and it's healthy, and we should embrace it. But we just have to kind of keep tabs on it and not get over indexed in one area versus another.
Yeah, thanks, Jeff. Next slide, Jen. So before we go and open it up to everyone, and I know we were working at a pretty fast clip, maybe let's just share a few stories of key lessons learned and any of those moments where, we both, our hair went up. I threw my baseball hat off. You decided you had to go jump in the swimming pool to cool off. But what are some of the big nuggets that, if we had to say two things to get right, what would they be? I know we both have so many stories, Jeff.
Um, well, definitely the data for sure. I mean, that's, really because anything that you're going to try and do with AI, if you are not going to spend the time to really get your data inputs nailed down, you're just wasting everything that's going to come afterwards. So that would be the number one. And look, any good business invests in its people. So I think that trying to find an AI champion, an AI czar for your company is really important. Having an AI steering committee, and um, you don't necessarily have to have an ethics committee, but certainly leaders in your company should be working actively to decide how you're going to work to eliminate bias, how you're going to ensure that your use of AI is going to meet your needs as your customer needs in ethical ways. Um, there's a lot of gray area that AI introduces, which is important to really be grounded in how your company wants to use it and how it doesn't want to use it, and making sure that your employees are clear on that. So I'd say those are probably the two major things, the lessons I've learned. And in both cases, when people just charge forward, uh, bad things happen, when you miss those two steps.
Yeah, the receptivity to do the cleanup on data. I find often people want to partition, okay, well, clean up this little piece to solve and advance this use case, but not necessarily dealing with the entire system. And obviously that can drive some credibility, for investing in the next step. But it's a big nut to crack, and humans are quite messy, as we well know. I think it's also that we'll get to a point with AI that it will be able to extract the meaning and kind of reverse engineer based on that. Then this should be the structure within the field and the definitions and the taxonomy and things. And so I think we're going to see a lot of innovation there because we've been dealing with this data nightmare issue for, I don't know, ever since I was at Xerox and Accenture as a partner. And, every company I go in, it's like, oh my goodness. So unless
Right? It doesn't change. And then look, even the best and well-maintained databases are going to turn about 20 to 25% a year. Just the nature of it. People move companies, they retire, they change their names, they all kinds of things happen. And the amount of data that we're collecting and need to collect is also exponentially more than it was 10 or 20 years ago.
Couple of lessons I would add to the roster that you've talked about is really ensuring that you've got the right measurement metrics because different AI structures have different AI metrics, right? So
That's
predictive
true.
models have very different metrics than LLM models. And what I often find is the level of maturity on the metrics. And it's one thing is on the business case side, which, by and large, we're all pretty creative there on driving those those desired outcomes. But when it comes to the sustaining aspects and the iterative thinking, I do find that there's not enough skill competency in the data science teams. I think the other piece to watch out for is making sure, and you talked about talent, that the right talent have the right skills to solve a specific use case and to really dig deep. And same thing with the external providers, right? There's so many people
Yeah,
out
no, absolutely. And well, these skills are in multiple areas.
there.
A lot of emphasis is put on prompting. I think it's a little overhyped. Don't get me wrong, that is an important skill for people to learn how to use. But even if you don't know how to prompt, you can ask the LLM to tell you what kind of prompt should I use, like if you were an expert. Um, yes, it's important for people to learn how to prompt, but there's so many other areas of AI, AI systems and structure, AI ethics, AI governance, AI data models, AI business models, different kinds of AI, not getting so enamored with just ChatGPT, but machine learning, deep learning. There's the number of elements to this as you look around at your skill sets, and as the way that we work is definitely going to change over the next 5 to 10 years. There's no question about that. Um, and AI will be a big part of that. And so part of what we need to be doing as leaders is thinking about what our workforce is going to look like 2 years from now, 5 years from now, and starting to pave the way now. Because the way that we did it is not the way we are going to do it. And that really requires time, effort, and planning. And if you just keep spinning on the treadmill and you're going to be doing the same things you've always been doing, you're just not going to get it.
I get there for sure. And I know one of the things that we've been doing is a lot of board director training recently, executive leadership, really upskilling them on the language of AI, and also preparing them for the questions that they need to really manage risk. And like you mentioned, the governance committee and how important that is. But the whole leadership team, and I still find major gaps in procurement, right? So you've got the suppliers coming in with their different wares, but not enough due diligence on the integrity of their AI practices and models. So it is still very much an evolving landscape.
It's a wild, wild west situation. Yes.
Exactly. Um, Jen, I think we can turn it over to you now to open it up for questions that folks here have asked, and maybe Jen, you could direct the question to Jeff or me, and I'll let you just run with it.
Sounds good. Okay, the first question I've got here is, are there industries or use cases where this has been already particularly impactful?
Well, I mean, that's a broad question because there's so many different aspects of this where it absolutely has been impactful. Look, Amazon's been using AI for years. I mean, that's how we get all those personalized offers and recommendations on the engine. And credit card companies like American Express have been using AI for years and understanding and predicting patterns. Banks and credit unions are using AI data that's built upon digital banking systems to make you customized and tailored offers every day. So we're seeing this more and more and more. We're seeing it in manufacturing, AI-enabled CAD design for bespoke manufacturing. Hexagon is an example of a company that does that. So AI is embedded and has been embedded into our systems for 20, 30 years or more. Now, the use of LLMs, though, is newer and lighter. I think people are still kind of working through that and the best way to use that as a front end. But the large language models are probably the lightest and probably one of the most popular, but most misunderstood of what they can and can't do.
Yeah, I would just echo every industry's been impacted. I don't think we'd find one that hasn't been applying some form of AI. And I think that those table stakes are quite mature. I think irrespective now, it's the accountability across the entire enterprise to really think deeply about where you could go in this next evolution. And I think more deeper thinking, because in some ways, if you ask most CEOs to print off a list of all their applications that are using AI, they wouldn't be able to do it right away, and how many algorithms they have. But now with the intensification, people are taking stock of what they really have and what the risks are.
Well,
And also,
unfortunately, most CEOs and boards are taking the wrong short-term view, which is how many people can we take out, because we put AI in. But they don't even know what that means, right? Oh, I can reduce this department by 20% with AI. Like, okay. And then they just expect it to happen. But that depending upon the department and what you mean, that has massive implications. It's frankly not that simple. That's not to say that AI won't replace some jobs and create some open, but just taking this macro Machiavellian viewpoint, that we're going to be able to reduce our workforce without understanding the change implications, how the business needs to work, what's going to happen differently, how it impacts the culture, all those things are important. And yes, there's always pressure to chase quarterly performance, stock price, et cetera, but that has to be balanced out with responsible and ethical leadership.
yeah, absolutely, Jeff. Jen, what's the next question?
Do you have any examples of how personalization has driven both customer satisfaction and revenue?
Well, I mentioned Amazon already, as well as some of the credit card companies. Those are two great examples. Um, Disney uses AI a lot of times in their personalized offers. Expedia uses AI for recommended offers and travel experiences. And so these are all just areas where they can deliver a better customer experience because they're looking at past and current patterns and being able to present you with a dynamic offer based upon your specific interests that's going to drive up your engagement.
Yeah. And you're starting to see a lot of interesting developments too between different organizations to come together, and drive integrated insights, right? So, whether it's your grocery spending, with, maybe some of the goals you personally have, where different solutions are, bringing a better experience together. So I think it opens up a lot of creativity in thinking through the whole value chain that you might want to expand upon. The piece that I'm the most excited about actually within the whole AI structure is very much on the health and wellness side, particularly as it comes to, really tackling some of the tremendous issues we have with diseases. And, you see the advancements and clinical knowledge being pulled together at with incredible insights, so that sort of democratization and integration, to solve some of our biggest health and
Yeah,
challenges.
look, very much like how wireless towers were used to
Yeah,
help like Africa and emerging countries really get Wi-Fi and really get into the modern age without making the significant investment. AI is going to be able to do that in areas like healthcare. But some of the concerns, HIPAA one, and how these models are trained, and then bias too. Um, it is well known that um, there's racial bias in healthcare, particularly towards minorities, in terms of how they're evaluated for healthcare. And so it's really important to understand how these models are being trained and developed and used by practitioners to ensure that everyone truly will get equal treatment.
yeah, yeah, that equitable side is obviously it's only as good as the quality of the data that you're feeding in, right? So if we're bringing all the historical biases, we just repeating the past rather than really advancing the equity and inclusiveness side. Jen, any other questions in the roster there?
Let's see, just one more. How can we ensure we're using data effectively and ethically?
Well, those are probably two very different specific questions. So I think, so first, ethically, I'd say it really goes down. It's really important to have an ethics board or group at your company that's really laying out how you're going to be using AI and for what purposes, and that you're putting in some governance standards to measure that. That's really, really important. And I know for a lot of companies that might feel like overkill. Like, geez, we already have a cybersecurity team and we have to have an infrastructure team. We have to have this, but okay, understand, but this is going to be a critical part of how we work. And so those are for some of the first steps from an ethical standpoint to make sure that that's going to be addressed. From an effectiveness standpoint, it really goes back to those use cases. What data do we need for what use case and how are we using it? And what are our gaps? And then how do we use AI to close those gaps? And so we can measure what's the inaccurate rate today, the error rate as a result of a bad data. And then we can look at the net improvement by applying AI related processes tomorrow. And that's how you would measure the effectiveness part.
Yeah. And I think we're also starting to see now, well, I think just big picture on the the regulatory environment, the different states, in the US have some different laws. You have to be very mindful of those regulatory or um, legal guidelines, obviously with the EU, they're further along in really outlining the sort of the ethical structures. Um, the US is with Trump has obviously backed off the AI Blueprint Act, and that's setting, causing some concern. And even in Canada, for any of those that are here from Canada, our ADA Act has been stalled, and maybe as people are now saying, we might not have our own governmental ethical AI legal legislation for another 2 years. So I think what's really important is the regulators, right? Often we say that we've got more controls in the consumer controls in our toothbrushes than we do have in the AI industry. I know that's a simple analogy, or even the meat that's going into a sandwich. So I think one of the perspectives we have to really bring into the use case is the risk, and for that use case. And like, I really like the fact, Jeff, that you said very thoughtfully, really think hard about, what you want to create, because just doing 20% headcount reduction, might sound easy, but it's very complicated. And is that really the right thing to do? So a whole lot more, I think, rigorous.
And it's not complicated to cut the heads, but it's complicated to figure out then what do you do next. But on the regulatory front, I mean, I've said this for a long time though. Waiting for government, especially here in the US, to help from a regulatory standpoint. Government always lags, even in the best of governments. Business has to take a proactive lead in doing that. And with this administration, which was probably going to go the opposite direction of any kind of regulation in multiple areas, it's even more incumbent upon businesses to be able to take that active role.
Absolutely. And to take it very seriously, right? Of having what I think one of the dynamics that we see in some of our larger financial service organizations is that they will have a chief AI officer, a chief data officer, a chief cybersecurity officer, a lot of
Mhm.
chiefs, right? And the need to really, your point, coming together and integrated governance, but also being clear about their own accountabilities and responsibilities. Sometimes too many chiefs. And then, of course, we've got our CIOs, right? Who are often being relegated to the legacy environments, right? And rather than
That is true. Yeah, there's a lot of dynamic shifts happening in the boardroom.
exactly. Jen, any other questions? Otherwise, I think we'll turn it over to you to close out and thank our audience and Jeff.
Yeah, sounds good. Thanks so much, Jeff. It was a pleasure to connect and chat about AI together. I invite our listeners again to go to saleschoice.com/resources. We'll be adding a copy of this video as well as our YouTube channel, and join us next time for more insights on the AI world.